Okay, so the first one is very specific schedule. It says for rising seniors, is the following schedule recommended? And this person lists something like 3 APs, but there's like 3 other honors classes. One of them happens to be multivariable calculus. So very, very rigorous schedule. So the person asks, should I take this schedule or take only 5 classes in order to have some more time for college applications? Now, of course, you do want a pretty competitive schedule for senior year too. And I think one of the best ways that you can handle a pretty tough schedule senior year is by trying to front load some of that work during the summer, right? So oftentimes with HS2, we start, having students work on even UC essays, even in the spring right now. And then during the summer, they can work on things like their personal statement. So they're not going to be as stressed out and can consequently handle a much more rigorous schedule. So even for the UCs, even if they don't technically factor in the senior year grades, they still evaluate you based on the rigor of your schedule, right? So like how competitive or how strong your classes are still is something that'll be factored in terms of the overall competitiveness and taking advantage of the most difficult classes available at your high school. Um, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. But keep in mind, this is also a very individual decision, right? So if you've been able to handle a really rock solid 11th grade schedule with like multiple APs and you're getting straight A's, you're handling it just fine, then sure. If you struggled with that and you maybe got a B or two, then the schedule like this that you have here in the Q&A is probably going to be a little bit hard, right? Considering the extra time that you're going to have to allocate to college activities or college application activities. Okay, so next question is it worthwhile to invest time to start a science club at school? If my school says they do not want to do any science competitions, what activities are meaningful activities focused for the science club? Not every science club has to be overtly related to science competitions. I think that's one type of science club, right? You have like there's a club dedicated to like a bio Olympiad or physics Olympiad. That's one type of science club. But I know a lot of science clubs that are more about actual exploration of the topics. Like I've heard of like a neuroscience club. I've heard of things like marine biology club, where it's largely exploration and focusing on things like getting guest speakers. I think that's also another important thing that you can focus on if your club for any reason doesn't do any of the competition aspect of things. Okay. Next is I'm a strong student, but I'm still not getting into the science research programs such as Cosmos and RMP. Not sure what I'm missing. What should I do? Okay. That's a little bit of a tough question. If you're already a rising senior, obviously you do need to pivot to something else just because applications to some other programs are already sort of have already passed. If, however, you're only rising freshmen or sophomores, sometimes that's part of the issue. RMP is incredibly, insanely competitive. It's like 4%, and they do tend to very, very strongly favor upperclassmen. So they, have a strong preference for rising seniors. So that's definitely something you're going to want to keep in mind, especially for applying for next year. I would definitely have more options available, not just Cosmos and RMP. I would also concentrate on this upcoming year or even this summer to build your resume. Oftentimes, it's not just because you're a strong student grade-wise. It's that whoever is picking these, your mentors, need to feel like you can contribute to their lab. So oftentimes, for things like SIP at UC Santa Cruz, a lot of the internship positions may require some data analysis and some coding skills. So if you could take courses for that, if you can get some experience doing that stuff during the school year or this summer, that could position you better for the following summer to be more competitive for these types of competitive research internship programs. Next, if I cannot get into community college class this summer, do you recommend taking class through an online high school instead? What option do colleges prefer? I would tend to just avoid the online high school if you can, especially if you're going for an AP one, because if you take it during the summer and you're not taking the actual AP until the following May, that just doesn't seem like a very good option. There's probably no reason why you can't do a community college class, because if it's going to be online, you don't have to do the one that's nearby your place. You can go ahead and get an asynchronous class for if you happen to be in, let's say, California, you could take any California community college. If you're in NorCal, you could take one even in SoCal if it's entirely online. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. There are also pre-colleges that you could take for college credit, or like we often have at HS2, we do have like a partnership with the UC Riverside to get actually UC approved GE courses. So if you wanted to be able to kind of like get college level courses, there's always a way to do that. I would not resort to taking an online high school level class just because, a high school level class by itself in the summer is not going to give you the same weighted credit, even if it's for an AP, right? Do you know what I mean? Because it's not going to receive the same weight. So it's just not a viable option for me. Next, what summer program do you recommend for rising senior students? RISD pre-college or SIP UCSC? Oh, those are two different programs. Obviously, the RISD program is more for like art kind of programs. SIP is much more leaning towards sciences. It just depends. They're both going to be pretty good programs depending on what your major would be. SIP would obviously be better if you're going for more STEM-based research. RISD, because it's Rhode Island School of Design, would be great for like if you're going for art, architecture, those kinds of things, design. Okay, just depends on what you're looking for. Next is for private universities, what is more important, rigor or grade in particular subject like science? Everything, right? They take a look at the totality of your transcript. They'll factor in everything, right? So they're not really looking at a pure GPA per se. But having said that, if you're looking for top private universities, then obviously they're going to be able to, like they have their pick. So it's oftentimes to be very competitive for those top schools, you have to be at straight A's or nearly straight A's. Next, for an 11th grader, should they opt for challenging class like AP Physics C, where getting an A is unlikely, or play it safe by taking an easier science course, where getting an A is more feasible? I mean, that's a balancing act. I think AP Physics C would look better if you're going for a field like engineering or computer science would be more relevant. If you don't think it's going to be easy to get an A, you could spend your summer, this upcoming summer, to prepare for it by taking preparatory coursework or previewing. So depending on what field you're going to, AP Physics would be, the more logical course. I mean, you could take like an AP Environmental Science if you just needed an AP Science course and you're not going to be a science major. But depending on what field you're going for, Physics C would probably be, the one that they would look for the most. Like I said, if you need to prepare for it, do so to be more competitive. Don't resign yourself to the fact that I'm going to take a certain class and just get a B. Okay. Next, a student's grades are A and there's no national or state awards. How to apply for Ivy League colleges? Yeah, I mean, there's oftentimes like some of these top Ivies will often reject 4.0 students all the time if they don't have the matching activity profile. And it doesn't necessarily have to be national or state awards. Like it just they need to see that you're making an impact. They need to see that you are definitely advancing your knowledge of a certain field. Like you could do that with research. You can do that with, creating your own nonprofit. You don't necessarily need national or state awards per se. It'd be nice. It makes you stand out a little bit more. But there are, we've had students get into those top schools even without said national or state awards. Okay. Next is, should I take classes from different community colleges or should I try to take them from one community college? I guess logistically, it'd be easier if you took them from the same college, because if you have to send transcripts to every single college you're applying to, it just adds more work to have to get it from a different institution. I would say the main reason why you would want to have more than one college is if there's certain classes that are unavailable at the college that you've already taken classes at, just to kind of like mix and match. But that's basically a less preferable option. It's still better logistically to take them from the same school. I mean, at the end of the day, you just adjust based on what your needs are, right? So if you're like, well, I'm going to be somewhere and I need an asynchronous class and the college that I took courses before doesn't offer that, then sure, go for it. Next, if a student excels more in English and history, what major should you suggest they apply for? Any other recommendations? Since so many go for STEM. I mean, that English and history, so basically just non-STEM, right? It just depends on what their interests are, right? So there's obviously business, they can go into things like international relations, political science. They could go straight up for English or history as well, right? At the end of the day, for those majors, oftentimes it's not really impacted majors for schools. So it's just best to go with whatever they have the strongest evidence for in terms of what they are most passionate about or what aligns best with their activities, because you don't want to pick a major out of the hat, so to speak, and not have it align with anything that looks like it matches what your profile suggests you're passionate about or strong in. Okay, next is, my kid was rejected by UC summer programs. His weighted GPA is around 4.7. He also qualified as one STEM-related national finalist, but was rejected by UC summer programs. What should we pay attention to for college applications in senior year? I don't think summer programs are a good barometer, to be honest, right? Like I said, RMP, it's all about utility in terms of like looking for interns that do have skill sets that match what they're looking for as labs. Oftentimes for these summer research programs, it's not really like an admissions officer per se, not like in the traditional sense of like, in college admissions, oftentimes it's the mentors themselves that are picking. So they're oftentimes looking at like utility, right? So don't use that as any sort of meaningful barometer in terms of like, where some of these students get in. Okay. Next, you recommend California students apply to University of Washington? Yeah, absolutely, right? It's one of the best schools for computer science, obviously, but it's going to be heavily impacted, right? You're looking at probably like something ridiculously low, like a 2 or 3% chance for CS. For engineering, they'd probably fare a little bit better because for engineering from non-resident for for University of Washington, you're looking at maybe 30 or 40%. But UW is still pretty strong overall. I mean, it's not quite at the level of like a Berkeley or UCLA, but it's probably comparable to like mid-range UCs. Okay, let's do a couple more here. Okay, will one STEM teacher reference be sent out to many universities that apply? I'm not sure what the question is asking for. Usually in the Common App, you assign a teacher, right? And that, you can assign which teachers each college will receive. So depending on like how many colleges you're looking for, you can assign just if some don't even require any recommendation letters. If they require 1, 2, or 3, as long as they have them in the system, you can just assign them. Okay, so the last question I'm going to take today. So congratulations on the results. Question, does the list include students who were admitted repeatedly? Are there many such students? I think we count total admissions to those. So in theory, yes, there are going to be a couple that are admitted. But then again, these days, it's very difficult. You don't get students that sweep like all the Ivies, for instance, but there are going to be some cases where, some students have had multiple admissions, yes. Okay, are the students concentrated in certain branches or consultants? No, they're pretty much across HS2 overall. Okay. All right. And the last question is more for 504 plan. That's definitely something we can forward. Like HS2 does have partnerships with college financial planners. I think that's probably the best thing to ask them. We may have another future seminar dealing with that stuff. I try not to get into any specific financial advice just because one, I don't, that's not my field. I don't want to give any advice that's binding in any way for that. Okay. All right. Okay, one last question, I guess, is how many hours of work should I expect from a community college class? Simple multiplier is that however many number of hours per week you spend, multiply that by 2 or 3, and that's how much time you should spend doing reading, homework, etc. Okay, so if it's a 4-hour class per week, do 8 to 12 hours. All right, so that's, I guess, all the time I have. Thank you so much. I apologize.